welcome everyone to our Celebrations Around the World program. Tanisha's going to talk about New Year's Eve in this one, so we're looking very forward to it. It's going to be a lot of fun. I'll introduce myself now. My name is Chris.
Hi there, my name is Tanisha, and I am so excited to bring you guys New Year's Eve. Thank you, Chris, so much for introducing me. I will go ahead and take it from here, and let's celebrate New Year's Eve. So this one, of course, is one of the most fun holidays of the year. This one is just a massive party. It's a great time. It's a party for grown-ups. It's a party for kids. It's a party for everyone. So before we get started, for this one, New Year's Eve is more of a fun holiday, but of course, with all of our celebrations around the world, just want to reach out there and let everybody know. We know that people have different religious traditions and different ways that they bring in the new year or bring in or celebrate different holidays. With this one, we're basically trying to give everybody a taste of different holidays, religious traditions, and celebrations around the world. So we know we can't cover everything, but we do try to give you guys a wide range of things that people celebrate. So before we jump in, I actually want to ask everybody a question. So my question for our audience, let me go ahead and take myself off camera, is if you will be staying up to bring in the new year. So yes, I will be wide awake, or nope, I will be fast asleep. So just want to get an idea of everybody who's going to be staying up for the new year. Give you guys a few seconds to answer. All right, so it looks like everybody is going to be staying up. Yes, I will be wide awake. So will I. I love New Year's Eve is one of my favorite nights. It's just a really fun time to get with friends and family and celebrate. Well, this year was a little different, so I don't know if everybody will be willing to celebrate it, but at least at the very least, we'll be happy to welcome in a new year. So it's a great chance to reflect on the past year and to welcome in the new year. It's a wonderful time. So let me go ahead and hide that poll and let's jump in. So we are going to start with some New Year's Eve fun facts before we get to the celebrations around the world. So the first known New Year's celebration occurred around 6000 BCE by the ancient Babylonians. It's a long time ago. The tradition of sharing a New Year's kiss may have originated with the ancient Roman Saturnalia festival. And interesting enough about Saturnalia, as I was doing research for this celebrations and other celebrations program, Saturnalia came up for a lot of winter solstice related December, late in the year program. So if you want to learn more, that's a holiday that you made, an ancient holiday that you may want to look into. Auld Lang Syne, perhaps the most well-known song associated with the new year, and music doesn't come through very well on our presentations, unfortunately, but everybody probably is familiar with that song. It's a song that you usually hear first thing after the clock strikes midnight, at least in the United States. It's perhaps the most well-known song associated with the new year. It was written in 1788 by Scottish poet Robert Burns. So he wrote the poem and then he set the poem to a Scottish folk song, Scottish instrumental, folk song. The first country in the world to ring in the new year is Kiribati, and the last country is American Samoa. Both of those are in the South Pacific. Americans drink approximately 360 million glasses of sparkling wine, and that includes champagne, each New Year's Eve. And this is also a fun one too. January 1st isn't the first day of the new year for everyone. Many religions and cultures recognize other dates as the beginning of the new year. So you may have heard of Chinese New Year or Persian New Year, or in the Jewish tradition, they celebrate their new year on another day. And the Muslim tradition, they celebrate their new year on a different date. So there's a bunch of new years. So that's a great thing. You can celebrate New Year's all year. So there's a whole bunch of different years that are associated, dates that are associated with the new year. So let's jump in and talk about some of the celebrations around the world. So it's really hard to have a conversation about New Year's Eve without talking about the wonderful Times Square in New York City. I have never attended New Year's Eve in Times Square, but I have been to the city during that Christmas season, in between Christmas and New Year's, and it's a really interesting experience to go there and see how they set everything up. So let's go ahead and talk about it. The first New Year's celebration in Times Square occurred in 1904, with the first ball drop happening in 1907. And this was crazy to me when I heard this figure. About 1 million people attend the Times Square celebration each year. That is a lot of people. I don't know if any of y'all have had the chance to go to New York City, Times Square, but if you look at the size of Times Square and you think about how many people are 1 million people, I have no idea how they all fit in there. About 26.5 million people, and this was last year, watched New Year's Rockin' Eve, one of the most well-known New Year's broadcasts. There have been 5 versions of the Times Square ball, with the current ball weighing 11,875 pounds, and there's a picture of it on the bottom of my screen there. 12 feet in diameter with 32,256 LED lamps. After 3,000 pounds of confetti blankets Times Square, and I got a picture of Times Square when they released the confetti, a massive cleanup effort begins. It takes 190 workers 8 hours to clear 50 tons of trash, which is really impressive if you think of how quickly they're able to clean everything up when you think that there's 1 million people, 3,000 pounds of confetti, all of the waste that comes from 1 million people, that they're able to get that little bit of workers to clean everything up. And another fun fact that I wasn't able to fit in here, because I wanted to look up and see how many places around the world were still able to celebrate New Year's Eve, considering the situation we're in. And it looks like New York City is still going to put on their celebration in Times Square, except it will not be attended. There won't be anyone in attendance, and they'll just be filming it to be watched. As you notice with New Year's Rockin' Eve, it's a broadcast. So they're going to be filming the ball drop for broadcast. So if that's part of your New Year's tradition, if you still want to ring in the new year with New Year's Rockin' Eve, they're still going to be filming it. People won't be able to gather in Times Square. So let's talk about New Year's Eve in Sydney, Australia. The Midnight Pyrotechnic Show in Sydney Harbour is one of the most recognizable New Year's celebrations in the world. It's also one of the most watched celebrations, as midnight in Australia translates to daytime for a huge part of the world. To give you an idea of the time difference, when the clock strikes midnight in Australia, it is 8 a.m. in Tampa. So that's a lot of time zone. So a lot of people are able to watch the New Year's fireworks show, which is quite impressive during the day before they themselves ring in the new year. The first fireworks show was in 1976. The Sydney Opera House and Harbour Bridge are prominently featured, with the latter featuring an impressive light show. The fireworks show lasts for 12 minutes, 1 minute for each month of the year. And so again, like I did with New Year's Eve in Times Square, I did look up to see if Sydney was still putting on their fireworks show, and they are. They're kind of doing the same thing that New York City did, where they're limiting the amount of people that are allowed to attend, and the fireworks show will only go on for 7 minutes this year instead of 12. Approximately 23,000 fireworks are used in the production of the pyrotechnic show. All right. Let's talk about New Year's Eve in Japan. And so one of the really cool things that I found is that Japan has their own New Year's observation called Omisoka. Let's talk about it. Omisoka was originally held in the Japanese month of Mikosa on the last day of the last month of the lunar year. In order to ensure a fresh start to the new year, celebrants clean their homes, pay their debts, and participate in purification rituals. An hour before midnight, people gather to have a bowl of toshi-koshi soba, with the long noodles of the dish representing the crossing over from one year to the next. At midnight, celebrants visit their local shrine or temple in a ritual called Hatsumode, or the first temple visit of the year. Celebrants greet each other with the phrase Yo Otoshi Wo, meaning translating to have a good new year. So they have a really awesome celebration as well. I included some pictures of the shrines or the type of shrines people would visit on the new year. Really interesting to see a country incorporate their ancient traditions and line them up with their current calendar. I thought that was really interesting. If you would like to learn more about our lovely New Year celebrations or other New Year celebrations that happen throughout the world, I highly recommend that you check out World Book Encyclopedia. That is available on our learning and research page of our website. And also tons of books on different celebrations through our two of our wonderful ebook platforms, Libby by Overdrive and Hoopla. And I also have to give a plug to our old school, not necessarily old school, to our physical books as well. You're able to pick up your physical books in person or via curbside. So I got to shout out HCPLC Connect, where you can look up all of the different books and resources that we have available to you. And I'm going to bring myself back on, actually, before I bring myself back on camera, I have some trivia for you guys before we head into the questions. I know we got some questions there. So before we head into the questions, let's do some trivia. First question for you guys. What country is the first in the world to bring in the new year? All right, so it looks like 75% of y'all were correct. The first country in the world to bring in the new year is Kiribati. Now, as far as the person who answered New Zealand, you're pretty close because they're kind of close to one another and they're all in that same part of the world. And as I mentioned before with Australia, New Zealand is right next to it. Sydney is probably the most famous and the biggest first celebration to bring in the new year. So close, but Kiribati was correct. And let's ask our second trivia question. So it's a little bit more harder. What year was Auld Lang Syne composed? Give you guys a few minutes to answer, or a few seconds to answer. All right, it looks like there was a 50-50 split on who was correct. So Auld Lang Syne was composed in 1788 by Robert Burns. All right, I am going to bring myself back on camera for questions.
All right, another fantastic presentation there, Tanisha. Thank you for all that. And yeah, we have some questions here. Someone would like to know, do all parts of the world celebrate New Year's?
Yes and no. So most parts of the world do have a New Year's celebration. However, like I mentioned earlier, it may not be on January 31st. So a great example of that is the country of Saudi Arabia. So they are a Muslim, they are a country that observes Islam, they're a Muslim country, and they do not have an official New Year's celebration for January 1st. Their New Year's celebration coincides with the Islamic New Year. So they're not doing anything on January 31st, but they're putting on a huge celebration for the Islamic New Year. China is kind of in the middle. So you'll see some New Year's celebrations on January 31st, but they also have their Chinese New Year, which is way bigger in February. So most of the world has some type of New Year's celebration, but it may not necessarily be on January 31st.
All right, thank you. Someone would like to know, what is a pyrotechnic?
Pyrotechnic is a fancy way to say fireworks. It's fireworks, flames. That's what Sydney calls it. They officially call it their New Year's pyrotechnic show. So I wanted to, do the official thing, but it's really a fancy way of saying fireworks. They set off a bunch of fireworks. So, but sometimes you'll see with like some, and I shouldn't say just fireworks, but you'll see like some flames and some, like if any other, like in concerts and stuff, like rock concerts, you may see some flames shooting up. So that may be part of a pyrotechnic show, but most pyrotechnic shows are fireworks.
All right, one last question here. It was about Kiribati and New Samoa, that they're close to each other, yet they're the first and last. Is there a reason why? What is the explanation behind that?
Yes, the international date line. So this is a little bit, I'm trying to find a good way to explain it in a few minutes. So the international date line, I'm going to have to bring it up. All right, so I am going, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Because I don't want to give you guys a bad definition of the international date line. So the international date line is essentially a artificial line created, it's a man-made line created that basically decides when one day ends and the next day begins. So let me bring up an image so you can see it. And so it'll make sense when I bring up the image of why that is the case. So let's see, because I don't want to give you guys bad information. So we will look it up live. All right. So you'll see here, this line here is the international date line, which is why the country, and you can, if you look way in this little area here, you can see how Kiribati and American Samoa, which are right next to each other, have the first and the last celebration of the year. So the day starts going to the left. So that's why Kiribati, which is somewhere in here, is the first one, while Sydney is one of the first major, Australia is one of the first major countries to have a big New Year celebration. You can see as it goes to the left, and then we continue on to the United States and onward, why that happens. So yes, the reason why, I hope that makes sense to you guys, but the reason why two countries so very close together can be the first and the last is because of the international date line. I hope that made sense.
It does make sense. No, it does. It's funny how crooked that line is.
Yeah, I know. You can tell it's totally, it's a man-made line. Like somebody was like, this is what we're gonna do.
Well, thank you for going the extra mile and answering that question. We appreciate it. And I believe that's it for questions. So if you want to bring up our closing slide there. If you'd like to contact us at the library, you can go online here at hcplc.org/contact, and you can find out about other great programs we're planning at hcplc.org/events. And we'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and thank you, Tanisha, for the great presentations. All week long, you've been providing great information for us. We really liked it a lot.
Thank you, guys.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. Happy Kwanzaa. Happy Hanukkah. Happy all the holidays. Good night, everybody.
Bye.